Hi there, welcome to the Self-Worth Renaissance podcast. This is your host, Kirsten Van Wingerden. I'm a licensed mental health counselor in Washington State. Please note that what is about to be discussed in this episode is not a replacement for individual therapy and is a collection of musings and thoughts on mental health topics. So I hope that you're all doing well and taking care as we're coming into the holidays. I realized that it was such an opportunity to kind of talk about holding on to hope for the holidays. There can be a lot of things that come up with emotions and family and loneliness, and there's so many topics around the holidays that we could talk about. But I really wanted to focus in on how to create hope. I think hope is kind of something that's forgotten about often, and it's something that we really need to hold on to. Hope is kind of like the last guest that comes to the party sometimes, and we need to learn how to hold on to that hope in order to get through really hard things. Hope is kind of like the practice of resilience. So the holidays can be a time of joy, connection, and celebration, but they can also bring stress, loneliness, and unmet expectations. So this is kind of just some practical advice, some emotional support, and maybe some inspiration about how to get through this season that is really stressful sometimes, especially coming out of an election season, right? It can be difficult to be around our loved ones at times. So go ahead and join me as we kind of explore and find light in the holiday season, even in the midst of these challenges. And let's just talk about maybe like 4 or 5 ideas and 4 or 5 topics that can come up around the holidays and how to navigate them. So the first topic I really want to cover today is loneliness and talking about loneliness in the holidays. So whether you are, so connected in, but that feeling of loneliness is still there, or you're in a transitional change in your life, you are, you've lost a loved one, or you are newly single, or perhaps you've moved somewhere really new, loneliness can be really felt in the holidays. I think about social media and the way that people post like all these beautiful highlights and the ways that they're connected into their families or their friend groups. And it can be really easy to start to compare ourselves and where we're at to other people and to start to think, well, why don't I have that, right? And to start to really believe and actualize that there's something really wrong with us if we feel that. And I like to say that loneliness is a gift because it's a reminder that we are made for connection, and what a beautiful thing that we get to experience loneliness and get to use that as a cue to start to take care of ourselves and start to create connections, right? We talk about the loneliness epidemic in the US, right? And if our bodies literally suffer in loneliness, then what a beautiful thing that there's emotional distress attached to that so that we can respond, right? We can listen to that emotional distress and say okay, that's a sign that I need to change something in my life. So see that loneliness is like a motivator towards change, not a place to get stuck, right? I think it's really easy to say, well, I'm lonely, no one likes me, no one wants to spend time with me. And that's just I'm sorry, but that's bullshit noise, right? That is just not truth. That is that is patterning, belief systems, values that you were taught in childhood that are just not true. So please take that to heart. Your loneliness is not a sign of your inadequacy or your weakness. It's just part of who you are. And every human being gets lonely at one point or another in their lives. And so I don't know what has brought you to loneliness today, but just know you're not alone in it in this holiday season. You are not alone in your loneliness. And so take that to heart and remember that. And then, also use that as motivation towards change, right? Okay, if I'm feeling lonely this season, do I need to go volunteer? Do I need to go join a club? Do I need to set goals for myself, right? If I am a homebody, how am I going to get myself out of the house this holiday season? So just to remember that. And I also just want to create a really tender space for those that maybe are alone and not by choice, right? So if family isn't nearby, if friends aren't nearby, I just want you to remember to be really gentle with yourself, to remember that it's okay to feel whatever you need to feel, to remember that, gosh, you matter, you belong, and you don't have to do this alone, and I'm sorry that you are right now. And so please take that to heart and hold on to that if you can. I think another thing to think about is just managing stress in the holidays. That's my second point, is how do we manage stress when, gosh, grandma wants us to do this, our moms want us to do this. And don't forget, we have to make an entire meal for everyone and host everyone. And, did you remember that Uncle Bobby wants X, Y, and Z on his cake, right? Like, there are just all of these stressors that come into the picture around the holidays, and it can be so easy to lose ourselves in that stress and to forget that we matter, and to forget that we actually need to breathe and center in and slow down. And I really hope that you find little pockets where you can stop just for 5 minutes and just listen to yourself and what you need. Because, gosh, as those stress levels increase, we start to act in ways that aren't us, right? The stress part of us comes out, and we start to get defensive or cranky, or, that anxiety causes that irritability, and suddenly we're yelling at our kids, or we're yelling at our partner, or we're yelling maybe at ourselves. I don't know what your thing is, but we start to act in ways that just don't align with who we are. And when we start acting in ways that don't align with who we are, we can get really down on ourselves, right? That's where that self-worth comes in again. We start to really doubt, okay, who am I really, right? Am I that person that got really upset in the parking lot and cut someone off and took their parking spot, right? Because I was so stressed because I felt like I needed to get this ham, and if I didn't get the exact perfect ham, then holy, guacamole, I don't know, this could be the worst thing ever, right? So to really remember to check in with yourself, and I think we've talked about this in other podcast episodes, the importance of just taking 5 minutes a day. If you can take 5 minutes, and that's all, every day, to just slow down, to just listen to yourself, to block out the excess noise, and to just check in with who you are, I have a feeling that stress is going to decrease, right? I have a feeling that the more space that you create for yourself, the more you're going to feel like you can take up space, right? And it's kind of like this feedback loop that increases over time. So remember that, right? Remember that point. Find ways to manage that stress. Slow down. Know that you're not alone in the stress. And remember that not everything is the end of the world. Even if the people around us seem to think it is, it probably isn't, right? Remember the things and the values that matter to you most in the holiday season. It's probably not the ham you're buying. it's probably the connection and community of the people around you. Okay, and the third point I have is set some boundaries with your loved ones. Boundaries are there to maintain a relationship and to allow the relationship to stay intact. Boundaries are not cutting off people. Boundaries are ways to continue relationship with our loved ones. In the holiday season, boundaries are tested. People are overwhelmed and expectations are put on us that may be unfair. And in response to those unfair boundaries, we can either choose those unfair expectations. We can either choose to play into the narrative and continue the pattern and feel resentful and feel upset towards people that they want more from us than we can actually give. Or the other option is we can say, hey, I love you. I don't have time for that. Could I do this instead? Right? It doesn't have to be a huge thing to set a boundary. It can be small. And I think in the holidays, we forget that boundaries are possible. And we often think if we set a boundary, we're communicating to that other person that we don't love them, when really boundaries are one of the kindest and most loving things that you can do for someone else, right? I think boundaries, they are the answer to keeping our relationships intact. And if you have no boundaries, you will become a resentful and bitter person, right? And I don't say that with malice or anger. I say that with truth, right? I think about the people in my life that I know have minimal boundaries, and they are overwhelmed by life all the time. And they seem confused, and they seem angry, and they seem lost, right? And I think that really comes back to like self-worth in our boundaries. It's really hard to believe that we're capable of setting those things. But I think that it's about taking that first step and taking the risk. And so be willing to risk and to bet on yourself, and to know too that if you set a boundary and you lose that person, they weren't meant to be in your life anyways, right? They were not meant to be there for longer than a season. And I think that could be a whole other topic that we get into in a different episode. But think about little ways that you can set boundaries in this coming season. You know, I'm thinking about a really tangible boundary. It could be not talking to your uncle about politics, right? Like saying, hey, love you. Why don't we talk about this instead, right? Or just changing the topic. Or a quiet boundary could be leaving the room. It doesn't have to be a big thing. And so I'm excited to hear maybe how you guys implemented those boundaries this holiday season. Okay, and the last point that I want to talk about is grief. Grief is kind of like this secret club you don't really know how to get into or that you're part of until you're part of it. And if you've experienced grief, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Grief can really come up in the holidays because it's a time where, you know, it's advertised that we're connected to our friends and our family and our loved ones. And, you know, the holidays, the way you're spending it this year might look a lot different from the previous year. And I would just encourage you to slow down with that grief and to allow that grief to be present. and to listen to that grief, much like our feelings of loneliness, as a cue that we need to take care of ourselves, right? That grief is there because something has been lost that was outside of our control, or maybe was. And it can feel kind of like we've lost a piece of ourselves, and we're trying to recoup that and recover that. And it's also a really isolating experience as well. And I would just encourage you in this grief this season to just tell someone that you need help, you need to talk to someone. I'd encourage you to find a grief group if you could. They totally exist. They're great. And I would also just encourage you that there's nothing broken about you. There's nothing inherently wrong with you if you're feeling grief this holiday season. It makes sense. You're not alone in it. And to know that with time will change, and it won't necessarily get better, but you'll learn how to be resilient in it. And to just note that grief is messy. You might have a good day and then a bad day, but you will get through. You are resilient. You will make it. And so remind yourself, just what do I need each day to put one foot in front of the other? What do I need to move through this grief? And maybe write a list of those things down for the days where the grief feels overwhelming and you have no motivation to take care of you. Write down the things that you need to do. Have that list taped up onto your refrigerator or your door. Have it somewhere nearby. Take the action for you, not for anyone else. So I really hope that you take these 4 ideas to heart of ways to manage really uncomfortable feelings and experiences during these holiday seasons, right? Managing stress, managing loneliness, grief, and setting healthy boundaries with the people you love. I know that it can be really tough to take those first steps, and I'm really honored that you would sit and you would listen to this and you would consider this for yourself. What a gift that you are giving to you and not to anyone else. So as always, it's an honor to share space with you in what I know is likely a busy schedule. Please like this podcast and subscribe to continue to hear more content and to help me create content that can encourage individuals in this period of time. Take care and stay safe out there.